Number 10. What if Jane Foster had found the Hammer of Thor? This one isn't so strange for the premise, but it's more bizarre because of where the premise took us in the end. This is a story we've also seen adapted to the main continuity, though fortunately it does not quite share this same ending, which I'm pretty happy about, to be honest. Jane ends up finding the Hammer of Thor and becoming the goddess of storms, taking up the mantle Thordis. Lady Sif, missing Thor, ends up finding and falling in love with Donald Blake, who is later revealed, of course, to be the true Thor when Odin asks Thordis to return his hammer to him. As thanks for her service, however, Odin makes Jane a goddess. However, as Jane was in love with Donald, who is now Thor and is in love with Lady Sif, her heart is broken, and she has to be returned to her mortal self because of this. But Odin has a better solution and proposes to Jane, who agrees, to marry him, and then they all live happily ever after. With Jane finding that those very qualities she both admired and loved in the mortal Don Blake are also to be found in the father of immortal Thor. My goodness. That's a very strange ending to that story. How about instead of being with my son, you be with me, his father, haha. Okay, Odin, what? I feel like I like it better when Odin just doesn't really like Jane. I think that works more. Is that weird? Number 9. What if the Avengers were the last superheroes on Earth? This story allows us to imagine what the world would be like if all the superpowered beings on Earth were defeated by the Avengers. At the behest of the Scarlet Centurion, the Avengers attempt to eradicate all superpowered beings, including themselves. In the end, after all threats have been defeated, they decide to disband, being the last ones with powers, in order to usher in an era of peace on Earth. They all go off to live their own normal-ish lives. Thor returns to Asgard, Tony returns to being a billionaire playboy in Las Vegas, only to realize that it doesn't really bring him any joy and actually considers entering into politics. And Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym actually seem to find quite a bit of happiness, going off and getting married and focusing on their time with one another, which is kind of sweet. I guess if they weren't superheroes it would work out pretty well for them. Scarlet Centurion does return to threaten Earth and forces the Avengers to come together one more time, but after defeating him, they once again go their separate ways back into retirement. And they also kind of question, like, if being a superhero is actually a bad thing, because does it create more problems than it solves?
Number 8. The Mandarin. Yes, the first time Marvel told us that the popular enhanced individual was actually an actor all along. The Mandarin. He was in Iron Man 3, kind of. I mean, I'm including him on this list because that version wasn't even close to what he's really like. He made his first appearance in Tales of Suspense issue 50. While exploring the inside of a cave in the Valley of the Spirits, he found an alien ship and a passenger still in there as well, named Axon Carr. But while he was there, he also saw 10 rings, these powerful rings, each representing a new power. So he took them, you know, because he's a villain. Then after finishing off the alien pilot, he began to study these rings and he began mastering them as well. So if he wears them all at once, his mind will be reached by the spirits trapped within the rings. Yeah, he's a pretty sick villain. And then in Iron Man 3, his name's Trevor and he just like crushes beer. Number 7. Grim Reaper. This next one we thought we were going to see in WandaVision, but we thought wrong. We thought maybe if it wasn't Mephisto, it's probably Grim Reaper, but we were wrong on both. The Grim Reaper did not show up, but his silhouette did for a hot second, maybe. Eric Williams made his debut back in Avengers issue 52. He's the brother of Simon Williams, aka Wonder Man. He was considered a black sheep of the family, and when he was younger, he accidentally burnt down his house after, you guessed it, being clumsy with chemicals. The usual. So his brother felt responsible for not stopping him or being there for him when watching him. So after that, he began to watch him closely, a little bit too close, because Eric then became rebellious because of the supervision, and then soon he ended up with the Magia in Las Vegas while his brother stayed and took over the family business. So with the business failing, no thanks to Stark being the top dog in innovation, he turns to his brother for some mob help to get things going again. So Simon embezzled money with Eric, but Simon got caught and thrown into the slammer. Went thrown right into jail. So Baron Zemo approached him, asked for help to take out the Avengers, and revenge on Stark was included, so he was like, sure, this sounds like a pretty sweet gig. So then he got turned into Wonder Man, but he ended up saving the Avengers from Zemo's trap. He turned, you know, he went good guy. But his brother, Eric, he heard of Simon's untimely departure, so he got angry and felt tremendous guilt after this. So he contacted the Tinkerer, who gave him a scythe. Then he took on the name of Grim Reaper, and voila, we now have a pretty badass villain. Number 6, Enchantress, aka Amora. She made her first debut in Journey into Mystery issue 103, and she has a love-hate relationship with Thor. And I'm not gonna lie, she's got a pretty sweet gig. She's got multiple mansions throughout the 9 realms, and she can make gold and diamonds with her tears. So even if she gets stood up on prom, she's gonna cry a few diamonds, and then she has more bling for the next date. So it's a win-win. She's really good at seducing people as well, like Scourge, for example. She would seduce him into helping her with her evil plans. But Amora wouldn't follow through with her side of the deal. She would just play hard to get, and she would mess with his mind and his heart. Now in the comics, she was sent by Odin to take out Jane Foster, but when she tried to attack Jane, of course, her love Thor intervened, and that's when she was banished to Earth by Odin. And then her next logical step as a villain is to join the Masters of Evil and get in line for taking down Thor or any of his annoying super teammates. Her tool is seduction, just one kiss, and that's all it takes to make you fall under her control. She doesn't have too much experience with hand-to-hand combat because she doesn't really need it. She just gets other dudes to fight her battles for her. What a boss. Number 5, Kang. This guy we can actually look forward to knowing more about soon, as he's confirmed for the next Ant-Man sequel with actor Jonathan Majors set to play him. But just who is Kang the Conqueror? Why is this a big deal for the Avengers? Well, he made his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964, and Kang has seen many centuries. His powers allow him to travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with weapons that can take on beings from any of those timelines. He's super smart and of course travels with armies, with each warrior equipped with the same armor and weaponry, so the fights aren't exactly easy by any means. The time travel stuff also doesn't come without consequence either. See, as Kang travels more and more through time, he creates time-displaced duplicates, and with the cosmic multiversal route that Marvel's going with now in the MCU, and especially with Loki's show, we could probably look forward to some more mind-bending battles. Number 4, Taskmaster. Taskmaster made his first comic book debut in Avengers 195. Anthony Masters is a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, of course, who turned into a mercenary and assassin. Although he is one guy, he has this ability where he can copy your every move. So he can replicate your physical skills. He has photographic reflexes, so he can watch Black Widow take down an evil henchman, and bam, he's got it locked into his brain. He knows how to do the same type of combat as well. He's actually the villain of the Black Widow movie, but that has yet to come out due to COVID delays, so the general public doesn't really know how cool this guy is yet. He became a teacher based out of the Taskmaster's Academy to train villains and agents, one of those agents being US agent John Walker, who is currently turning heads for all the wrong reasons in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now in the comics, it was actually Taskmaster who taught Walker how to throw Cap's shield so well. In Avengers issue 196, he was able to capture Yellow Jacket, the Wasp, and Ant-Man, and then when the rest of the team showed up, he took them on as well, only being defeated because he could not predict the movements of the robot Jocasta. Otherwise, it's a tough battle, this one for sure. Number 3, Mephisto. While on the topic of characters that we wanted to see in the MCU, I of course gotta talk about the devil himself. He made his first appearance as a serpent in Bible Tales for Young Folk issue 1, but he made his first full appearance as Mephisto in Silver Surfer issue 3. I don't think I have to explain too much about this guy or why he's a threat. I mean, he's Satan. He's the literal devil of the Marvel Universe. He lives comfortably in hell with lesser demons that serve him. The reason we thought we were gonna get Mephisto in WandaVision goes back to something he did in the comics, which was kind of a big deal. The comic was Avengers West Coast Volume 2, issue 52. We find out the truth behind Scarlet Witch's children, Billy and Tommy, who were in WandaVision. Now it turns out the 5 pieces of Pandemonium's soul were actually Mephisto. So Mephisto tricked Pandemonium and gathered beings possessing the appropriate fragments, and 2 of those 5 fragments just happened to be children of the Scarlet Witch and the Vision. So when Pandemonium arrived, he took the kids, which in turn gave Mephisto full strength, and this left Scarlet Witch having a breakdown. Mephisto's awesome. His deals are always crazy. Like after the comic Civil War, when everybody knew Spider-Man's identity, Spider-Man had to make a deal with Mephisto in order to save Aunt May because she got shot because he revealed his name to the public. So he's pretty wild. That's just one of many horrible deals. Number 2, MODOK. Making its first appearance in Tales of Suspense issue 93, MODOK was created by Dr. George Tarleton. He had worked with the team recently to create the Cosmic Cube, but the scientist supreme, Lyle Getz, figured the next logical step was figuring out a way to understand the powers inside said cube. So enter Project MODOK. spelt with a C at the end, not a K, that's important. So MODOK stood for Mental Organism Designed Only for Computing. Sounds like the perfect tool to analyze and probe this cosmic cube. So they grabbed that scientist George that I mentioned and altered him into this big-headed supercomputer. With a brain too big for his body, they had to give him a hover chair, which is referred to as the Doomsday Chair. I mean, he's already a villain. You guys are just kind of making this happen for him. The scientists did not prepare that with great power comes great superiority, so it wasn't long before MODOK overtook his masters, changed that last letter from a C to a K, making his new, more suitable name for the list, MODOK, which stood for Mental Organism Designed Only for Killing. He's the big bad villain in the new Avengers PS4 game, and he's as crazy as it sounds in that game as well. And finally, number 1, Morgan Le Fay. Now, with the Marvel Cinematic Universe leaning into the witch madness for the conclusion of WandaVision, we might actually get to see Morgan Le Fay on the big screen soon enough. She made her first appearance in Black Knight issue 1 back in 1955, and she's been a recurring villain to the Avengers in the comics for a while now. And when the Dark Avengers were formed by Norman Osborn, Morgan was their first enemy to face off against. She's a powerful spellcaster, one of those spells being reality warping by using these Norn stones. So she packs a punch. Elizabeth Hurley actually plays Morgan Le Fay in the show Runaways, and she's great when it comes to these witchy, devilish roles. I mean, she literally played the devil in the movie Bedazzled as well, which is pretty funny. Kicking off the list at number 10. Beast Boy and Raven. Okay, they say opposites attract, so when you put together an immature, shape-shifting prankster with a half-demon sorceress, things are bound to get a little weird at some point. Fans weren't really sure why the two had it out for each other, being so different and all. See, everybody didn't really expect them to last. Even during their time together, readers found it just not that thrilling. The chemistry was just, dare I say, bland, or not as big as some other relationships. Like in the early 2000s cartoon, she's annoyed by Beast Boy. She doesn't like how he's immature and how he does pranks and how he doesn't use his indoor voice ever, and she found his comedy to be annoying. And then in season 4 of Teen Titans Go, episode 12, it shows Beast Boy writing a song to tell Raven how he feels about her. And then in episode 13, Beast Boy tours with the song, but it annoys Raven. So he's playing his heart out, and she's like, I don't know, not really. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you haven't already, please go ahead down below and give us a thumbs up because it really does help the channel out a lot and it makes us feel good in our tummies. So please go ahead and do that if you haven't already. Thank you so much, and back to the list. Number 9. Jinx and Kid Flash. The Teen Titans show from the early 2000s, we saw Cyborg and Jinx flirting a lot while they were fighting. It was good, it was a nice little dynamic, keeping it real. They were fan favorites, and she was this villainous teenage sorceress who hit enemies with bad luck. And then in the episode Lightspeed, which aired in the final season, we see the introduction of Kid Flash. And in the same episode, this romance between him and Jinx was born, in the same episode. Which in turn resulted in her switching over to the good side, which is great, I mean, yay, go team. Like, that's a great win, but in one episode, with all that groundwork with Cyborg just kind of washed away, viewers weren't too pleased at the choices.
And it ain't Count Nefario. While Count Nefario wasn't purely evil at first, his desire for more wealth and power is ultimately his downfall, and he's very nefarious. He has been around for years and years, fighting almost every single Avenger he can think of. He also encountered Moon Knight after Mark Spector moved to LA and joined the West Coast Avengers, primarily becoming his villain. Count Nefario is immortal and has an unfathomably strong healing factor, because, you know, he's immortal. He received energy projection from the Living Laser, strength from Power Man, and speed from Whirlwind, all amplified 100 times. He can lift well over 100 tons, fly over 5,000 miles per hour, teleport, leech another person's energy, and so much more. However, it's likely that if you are a fan of Moon Knight, you knew about this guy, so he's not very high on the list. But honestly, not having known much about Moon Knight before this list, aside from he looks freaking awesome, all these villains are pretty new to me, so it's pretty cool getting to see all the characters that this guy has faced, and hopefully you at least hear about a few that you didn't know about. But no complaining if you're a Moon Knight superfan, okay? That's not allowed. That's cheating. And at 7, Dead Zone. There are a few characters more 90s than Dead Zone, but he has his appeal. Dead Zone sort of emulates the classic Iron Man villain Whiplash with his electrical whips, but he's less a mercenary than just an ideological warrior. He seeks to punish sinners by lashing them to death, that has him run afoul with Moon Knight. Dead Zone first appeared in Moon Knight's solo title and is pretty evenly matched for the character. When Moon Knight tried to take him down with his adamantium, Dead Zone catches it and then turns it around on him. There is very little on the wiki about him, and honestly I don't know what else I could say about him, but he's trying to do what Moon Knight does, but going about it in an absolutely abysmal way. Like, come on bro, really? Whips? Like, I get that they're OP in like the Spider-Man PS4 game, but seem seriously underpowered in real life or in comic books, unless they need them for plot or you're into that kind of thing. And at 6, Black Spectre. Carson Knowles was a veteran who returned home without applause. His job had been passed on and his wife left him with their son. He barely got by as a delivery man and found out his son was killed by phone. After his car was stripped for parts and a mugger accosted him, Knowles snapped and beat the man nearly to death. Seeking to destroy the city that treated him so badly, Carson Knowles ran as a dark horse candidate for mayor on his father's name and political connections. He also created a second identity as Black Spectre, beating and blackmailing the local precinct boss to support Knowles, and then in a fight with Moon Knight his mask slipped, but Moon Knight was unable to convince anyone that the mayoral candidate Knowles and Black Spectre were the same person. Eventually though, Moon Knight defeated Black Spectre in public and his assistant Marlene Arlone uncovered Knowles' corrupt plans for the city and his political office. So at least he lost. Halfway through into number 5, Shadow Knight. Shadow Knight's real name is Randall Spectre, Mark's younger brother. He was envious of Mark his entire life, which turned him into a horrible criminal. There was a murderer on the streets killing nurses called the Hatchet Man, so Moon Knight used his girlfriend Marlene as like bait to catch the killer. The plan worked, but Marlene perished. Yeah, and to make matters even worse, the Hatchet Man was revealed to be Randall. Randall later joined the cult of Khonshu, which ultimately resulted in him receiving the same powers as his brother Mark. However, he ended up choosing to use them for evil, donning the pseudonym Shadow Knight. Because, you know, every character needs to have a reverse version of themselves. Reverse Flash, Dark Archer, Bizarro. It was devastating for Mark to fight his brother and ultimately kill him by slitting his throat with a throwing crescent. Yeah, it doesn't get much worse than that, especially when you learn that Mark tried protecting Randall their entire lives. But then again, he killed your girlfriend, so... And at 4, Midnight Man. Originally a collector of art, Anton Mogart would commit robberies at the stroke of midnight to build his collection. When Moon Knight stops him, he seemingly drowns in a river, but instead, he ends up becoming deformed by the waste found within the sewers. Then he goes insane and starts collecting trash, and teams with Bushman to defeat their sworn enemy. When Midnight Man finds out he's dying from cancer, he decides to find his son, hoping that he can share some of his final moments with him. Mogart does what he can to stop his son from turning to a life of crime like he once did, and in the wake of his death, he becomes the hero Midnight. It didn't last, and he ended up becoming a cyborg for the Secret Empire, which, while sounding bad, I think it would be kinda cool, like, to be a cyborg. Like, as long as I still have, like, my free will, and my programming isn't controlling me, because that just doesn't sound like fun. Like, I want to be able to turn my arm into a giant cannon. That'd be great. Someone tries to mug me, I'm just like, sorry. Getting close to the end, and number 3, Seth Falcon. He belongs to a Scottish sect of Knights Templar and has several amazing powers. I'll never do that accent again. Falcon first appeared in Mark Spector Moon Knight number 43. Seth Falcon is immortal, has superhuman strength and stamina, but his strongest power is his touch. Using his clawed fingers, Falcon can drain the life force out of any living being, aging them in the process. If he holds his grip for long enough, Seth can drain the entire life out of somebody, all of it, turning them into a rotted skeleton. However, there's a catch. Due to biofeedback, the draining process backfires if Seth uses it on anybody who shares his DNA code, even partially. Simply put, he can't drain his relatives because it causes the series of issues that then hurts and weakens his powers. And yep, that's right. You guessed it, of course, Moon Knight turns out to be one of his long-lost relatives, so Falcon has to rely on his superhuman strength and stamina to outlast Mark Spector in any mutual fight. Which is good, because that kind of like levels the playing field. Penultimately, in at number 2, Cactus. Sometimes a name is just a name. It could have meaning, or it could just be something cool that the guy thought of that ended up kind of making sense. Other times, names are extremely direct and are probably too on point. That's the case with Cactus, who is exactly what he sounds like and nothing more. Created by Dominus, he's been a villain of the West Coast Avengers and Moon Knight on various occasions. Punching him definitely stings, but beyond that, it doesn't take all that much to break him or chop him up, because, you know, he's a cactus, which has actually happened before, though he can regenerate lost limbs, which I don't know if cactuses can do or cacti can do, but yeah, he's without a doubt one of the lamest villains in the Marvel Universe, but in my opinion, that makes him one of the coolest. This guy is literally a cactus, and that's hilarious. A couple years ago, the girl I was with at the time and I came up with a superhero that we called Cact Guy, who was basically in essence Cactus. And we didn't know that it was actually a thing, but it's funny to me that someone actually made this and then put it in the goddamn Marvel universe. That's hilarious. That's amazing. And Cactus is my new favorite villain ever because of that. Hashtag Cactus in the MCU. And finally, in the number 1, Hunter's Moon. Dr. Batter was born in Luxor, Egypt to 2 doctors and was an excellent student throughout his life, eventually becoming a doctor as well. He grew to become a very rational and serious person who didn't believe in any higher entities, despite still attending prayer and studying the Quran and the Hadith. This all changed when he was attacked by vampires and left to die on the streets, at which point he met the Egyptian moon god Khonshu. Dr. Batter survived and became a worshipper of Khonshu, who fancied himself the god's second highest priest, and opposite of Mark Spector. After learning that Moon Knight had taken in vampires under his protection, Dr. Batter terrorized the Nightwalkers to get his attention. Hunter's Moon eventually confronted Moon Knight, chastised him for taking in enemies of Khonshu, and expressed his intentions to correct him. Dr. Batter beat Moon Knight and invaded the Midnight Mission to kill the vampires, but Spectre recovered and knocked him unconscious after attacking him from behind. But you know what, after beating him, I'm not even gonna call it, that's kinda shady. I respect it. Starting us off in at number 10, Bootface. Okay, this guy's origin is the reason I wanted to talk about him. Bootface's origin was getting kicked in the face by Batman. That's it. I'm not even kidding. Bootface was a thug working for Terminus. He got his name because of the boot print embedded in his face, which, like I said, is from Batman. Bootface first appeared in Batman and Robin Volume 2 number 10 from 2012, and honestly, it's one of the most interesting origins I've seen. And I mean this completely seriously. Everyone else has like relatives die or was living in poverty. This dude just got kicked in the face and got so mad that he became a supervillain. Like, even if he wasn't really a good person beforehand, I mean, like, he was a thug and basically still is, but this time he has a ridiculous name. And a man who is fueled by pure rage because he was permanently scarred by his attacker that ends up being a superhero, yeah, that's good enough for me. Plus, I hadn't heard of this guy, so maybe you didn't either. And at 9, Professor Pig. Professor Pig originally debuted in the alternate reality story of Batman number 666, which I love. However, was introduced as a recurring character in 2009 in Batman and Robin number 1. In Batman Reborn, Laszlo Valentine was an extreme circus mob boss until something turned him into Professor Pig, leading him to begin funding his scientific experiments by selling, illicit substances to the criminal underworld. All in all, he's an extremely disturbing villain and makes me think about why people aren't afraid of pigs as they are afraid of clowns. Because if you ask me, this guy is freaking horrifying. Professor Pig, if you couldn't tell, actually ends up wearing a pig mask along with a butcher's apron, and what at times appears to be some form of hastily thrown together surgical outfit. This is just freaking weird, and he ends up brainwashing and controlling various people, and he ends up calling them Dollatrons. Straight up, I don't know what else to do with him other than just run away, so I'm going to move on now. Although next time I have a pet pig in Minecraft, I know what I'm naming him. And at 8, Joker's daughter. Unfortunately, it's not Joker's biological daughter. That would be a very interesting story. But this is just the girl who finds Joker's face, stitches it onto hers, and then goes berserk. So honestly, it could very well be his biological spawn. The only person that I think could commit such an atrocious act like this is the Joker, so who knows. While maybe not being as prolific and accomplished as the Joker, Joker's daughter is definitely insane enough to make this list, even if I'm pretty sure many people know about her. But hey, even if one person didn't and they watched this video, then boom, it's enough for me and it counts. But not to mention the fact that she also went by Catgirl, Scarecrow, Riddler's daughter, Penguin's daughter, Card Queen, and Harley Quinn. Each incarnation also calling herself the respected super person's daughter, which I have to say is going to make the family reunion very awkward. But in actuality, she ended up being Duella Dent, Two-Face's daughter. Apparently, which seems like BS, but we all love a girl with a little flair, you know? And at 7, Birthday Boy. Ray Salinger was a serial killer who operated in Gotham. Under the alias Birthday Boy, he was actually the first costume criminal encountered by Batman during his crime-fighting career. Introduced in Batman Earth 1 Volume 1 in 2012, Birthday Boy is fascinated by young girls resembling his first kill, a 15-year-old named Amanda Grant. When in his killer mode, he wears a burlap sack with holes cut out for his eyes and a birthday party hat, usually in a room decorated like a young girl's room at a birthday party. Great. As a calling card, he left birthday candles where he stole away his victim and told his victims to make a wish to a cake decorated with the words "Happy Birthday, Amanda," which is only creepier since we have our own Amanda here, and I feel like this guy is a representation of all her DMs. I think the sickest part of this character though was that when Batman first started, Birthday Boy had been hired by Mayor Oswald Cobblepot to eliminate his various enemies, and in return, he was given girls from the street, or enemies of the Penguin, as a reward. God. This is something that you'd see on like Criminal Minds. And at 6, the King of Cats. First introduced in, I don't think this was ironically, Batman number 69, nice, from 1952, Carl Kyle is the brother of Selina Kyle, who was inspired by his sister's infamy to become a costume criminal. His cat-like garb and his crimes revolved around the theme of cats, and he resembles a male version of Catwoman. In March of 1952, Gotham City was struck by a series of feline-related crimes, perpetrated not by the now reformed Selina Kyle, but by a costume criminal known as the King of Cats. Carl sends flowers to Selina, causing Batman to investigate her involvement, like the jealous boyfriend he is. He soon becomes convinced that she is innocent, but asks that her, the expert on feline-themed crimes, didn't know that was a thing, to aid him and Robin in arresting the King of Cats. Selina, however, refuses because it's her brother, but she doesn't tell Batman that. He gets captured easily by Batman and has his handed to him multiple times. I guess you're a punching bag when you're not a female that Batman wants to sleep with. Sorry, Carl. Halfway through into number 5, Mirror Man. Lloyd Ventress is a criminal who was detained at Gotham State Penitentiary. Using broken mirror shards, he distracts the guards long enough to escape from prison. Then, inspired by mirrors, somehow he becomes Mirror Man. Upon creating a machine that would enable him to look through objects, Mirror Man began targeting Batman so he could figure out his secret identity. He literally discovers Batman's secret identity by using an X-ray mirror, which is freaking nuts. Mirror Man gets sent to prison before he can reveal the identity, however, but because they want conflict, he manages to escape, with a plan to reveal Bruce's identity to the world, only foiled when Alfred, dressed as Batman, interrupts a press conference Bruce Wayne was holding, instantly disproving the fact that Batman is Bruce Wayne because you saw them both in the same room. However, the public should have also seen this coming, so maybe the people of Gotham City are dumber than we thought. Well, I mean, they had Condiment King, so I guess they are pretty dumb. And at 4, Calculator. While the Calculator now seems to be an oracle of sorts for supervillains, the original purpose and MO of the Calculator is far more entertaining and interesting for me. Noah Cutler began his criminal career by crossing the country and getting into fights with various superheroes intentionally, analyzing and recording their battle tactics to ensure that he couldn't be beaten again. Or in some incarnations, he would simply get beaten and then press a button on his chest to ensure that he didn't get beat again. Maybe that was taking down the information or something, I don't know. But either way, do you know how insanely overpowered that could have been? Just being able to press a button on your chest and then boom, you're instantly basically immune to Batman or Robin or even Superman. That would be amazing. You do this enough times and you can just do whatever you want. Then other villains start paying you to do their crimes for them because you guarantee success. That's freaking nuts. I wish they kept that Calculator because he could have been a bigger villain than Darkseid if he kept going like that. Damn, that would have been awesome. Getting close to the end in number 3, Killer Moth. Having decided that the lawbreakers of Gotham City needed a costume protector just as the honest citizens needed Batman, Killer Moth emulated the Dark Knight in every way, copying his paraphernalia and building on his legend to create his own supervillain identity, like Batman's version of Reverse Flash. He even had his own moth signal that supervillains could use when they were in trouble. Drewy Walker, introduced in Batman number 63 in 1951, is actually the first supervillain Barbara Gordon ever defeated as Batgirl, which I mean probably doesn't support the whole most powerful thing, but think about it. If Mothman was worried more about his twisted sense of justice than money, as he was motivated by, he would have been an insane villain. Wanting to protect the criminal underworld just for the sake of it rather than to get paid, while maybe slightly more unrealistic, would make him insane. He also ended up basically making a devil's bargain to become more powerful, but that resulted in him becoming a hideous creature that truly resembled the name Killer Moth. So, that could have been something. But ultimately, in number 2, the Eraser. The Eraser was the chosen alias of Lenny Fiasco, who turned to crime after living his college days under constant mocking and taunting by his classmates. Fiasco is a professional at covering up the tracks of other crimes. For a 20% cut, the Eraser will erase the evidence of another crime. And honestly, I think that this is the only job that anyone with the last name Fiasco could have. Sorry. This villain's power is a special helmet designed to look like a pencil eraser that can wipe off evidence, even though nose that would be invisible to the naked eye, which is actually pretty damn cool when you think about it. After Batman posed as a villain to try to capture the eraser, the villain told Bruce, who he had realized was Bruce, that he had actually become a criminal because Bruce shattered his dreams of going out with Celia Smith. Bruce didn't even remember her name, which made Eraser even angrier, but yeah. I think that this is the absolute coolest concept for a supervillain though, because in all honesty, if this guy just wasn't an idiot, he would have ruled the world. Straight up, this guy would ruin every single investigation. He could turn the tide of trials. This guy would end up being a shadow government. If only he wasn't a dumbass. Finally, in at number 1, Lex Joker. Lex Joker was created when John Dee, also known as Dr. Destiny, collapsed the DC universe in half. First appearing in Batman/Superman number 60 in 2009, Lex Joker is a combination of, you guessed it, Clayface and Bane. No, just kidding, it's Joker and Lex Luthor. Lex Joker hired Doomstroke and Terranado to destroy the Justice Titans. However, after the JTs allied with Batman and Superman, he hired 4 more mercenaries to create the Brotherhood of Injustice. Thanks to Terra, who had gone undercover within the JTs, they were able to attack the Justice Tower, and come on, let's be honest. If you have the brains of Lex Luthor and the complete insanity of the Joker, that's one hell of an opponent. When you have 2 powerful forces in comics, at some point they're just bound to be put together in some way to create a larger, even more powerful villain. And Lex Joker is probably the scariest combination that we could have gotten that wasn't like Joker and Doomsday or Joker and Darkseid.
Number 10. Big Wheel. Hey, wanna be a villain? Great. Just hire another guy to make you a big wheel with machine guns and rocket launchers on it so that you can ride around in it. It's that easy. That's what Jackson Wheel did. Can you guess what he called himself? When he first appeared, Big Wheel used his big wheel to chase and try to kill Rocket Racer while he was mid-fight with Spider-Man. Big Wheel wasn't even facing Spider-Man one-on-one. Just before he was about to get crushed, Spider-Man pulled Racer out of the way, and Big Wheel drove right off the side of a building and right into the Hudson River, ending both Jackson Wheel and his Big Wheel. All of this because Rocket Racer had some blackmail. Number 9. Crime Master. Why are there so many people who have no powers of any kind on Spider-Man's enemy list? This guy just walks around with a gun. That's it! He's another one of the many crime bosses in Marvel's New York, and I guess in that respect he chose a very fitting name. He is a criminal, and he has sorta mastered it. Usually, he employs others to do his dirty work for him, although he did partner with the Green Goblin for a short while before being shot and killed. He has come back from death multiple times under multiple different identities, which kinda made it hard for fans to follow who he is, even if they cared in the first place. Number 8. The Living Brain. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't a brain just kinda living by default? Like, if it's an alive human being, isn't it technically a living brain? This guy isn't living or a brain, I'm so confused! Okay, I'm gonna cut Marvel some slack here because the Living Brain is actually older than almost all of the main Marvel villains. He came before even the Green Goblin. He was created as a machine that could solve any problem, but malfunctioned after 2 guys got in a little scuffle and it went on a rampage until it was stopped by Spider-Man. It's been used by other smaller criminals, but was always stopped by Spider-Man. But hey, it eventually found steady work as a lab assistant and even saved the Spid on a few occasions. So there's that at least. Number 7, Big Man. I ain't got the facilities for that, big man. He really didn't. Frederick Foswell was a reporter at the Daily Bugle, and well, he was a little guy. Except when he wasn't. You see, Foswell was a master of disguise, and he used a costume that gave him a nice little hype boost in order for him to become aptly named Big Man. From this stature, he can now ride the adult roller coasters, reach the top shelf, and be the head of the crime gang, the Enforcers. Spider-Man works with the guy though, so unsurprisingly he was caught and incarcerated for a time. But Jonah gave him his job back afterwards, which is nice. He ended up dying in front of a bullet to save Jonah, so at least he wasn't all bad. Number 6, Black Fox. This one is a little sad. See, Black Fox is basically just a jewel thief who has had a very long career, seeing how he is now an old man. Just a regular jewel thief? Oh, why is this a problem for Spider-Man? It's not. It's really not. But you see, the problem for Spider-Man is that being an old man, Black Fox heavily reminds Peter of his Uncle Ben, which meant that Peter couldn't help but have a soft spot for the guy. He would let Black Fox go multiple times. I mean, I get it. I respect it. But Peter realized his weakness and stopped easing up on the old guy, finally throwing him in the slammer. While he isn't exactly threatening to anyone, he is the mentor of Black Cat, which does give him some notoriety. Number 5, Mirage. What's the best way to stop a robber? I know. Drop a chandelier on him. Wow, yeah, I guess that works. Mirage is a robber, but not just any robber. Oh, no. He and his gang had a specialty for robbing weddings. Honestly, who's expecting that? I mean, I wouldn't be. I'd be so surprised, I just give him my money, you know? He made a bad choice though, when he decided to rob the wedding of Ned Leeds and Betty Brant, where none other than Peter Parker was in attendance. Peter used his web shooters to turn off all the lights and don his spider suit. The day was saved when Spider-Man dropped the whole chandelier on Mirage, defeating him. Ouch. Number 4, the Spot. Could you imagine that the first time you reveal yourself to a hero, they just drop on the floor laughing at you? And on top of that, it's in front of Kingpin, one of the biggest crime lords in Marvel. It would be super embarrassing, except when you totally win and make them look dumb. Way to go, man. The Spot, yes, that's his name, had the power to create interdimensional portals, big and small, which he used to defeat Spider-Man and Black Cat the first time they encountered him. But only the first time. See, the Spot can only create as many portals as he has spots on his body, throwing them wherever he wants until he runs out, which he did in the second encounter with Spidey. And then he lost. Pretty badly. He's appeared here and there since, but he never really posed a threat to anyone, like anyone at all. But he did create the failed group, the Spider-Man Revengeance Squad, with other minor characters that lasted like 2 seconds. Hold up, I gotta stop you right there. Just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you, and I hope you appreciate us too. If you do, why not give us a little like and a follow? It really helps us to help you spend your free time watching top 10 videos. But hey, no judgment, we all do it. Number 3, slide. A chemical engineer turned super thief decked out in a super slippery suit. All right, let's get it over with. Jalome Bleacher created a chemical coating that basically eliminated the friction between an object and any surface it came into contact with, which, not even joking here, that could be really useful. Like, good job, man. Too bad the company he worked for closed their R&D department and Jalome had to find a way to independently fund his project. Honestly, I would have just found another company who wanted to fund me, but then I wouldn't appear on a list of people you never heard of, and that is a goal of mine. He created a suit with the chemical and used his slippery abilities to rob banks and try to destroy his old boss's business. His only other notable mentions were his midlife crisis and his death in a side story of the Civil War event where he was shot in the back for refusing to side with crime boss Hammerhead. I guess you could say that they had some friction. Okay, I'm just gonna slide my way to the door. Number 2, Stiltman. So long as I'm the master of my stilts, I'm unbeatable. I'm completely invincible. Wilbur, just stop. Just stop, man. Despite being an adversary to both Daredevil and Spider-Man, Stiltman just couldn't seem to be taken seriously. I can't possibly imagine why. Oh wait, no, I can. It's the stilts. Yeah, it's the stilts. What's interesting is that if you go into his Marvel wiki page, Stiltman actually has quite a long history, being involved in many storylines. And his stilts are actually pretty strong. At one point, the strength of them was able to plunge She-Hulk so far into the ground, she ended up in the subway. But then she beat him in a really embarrassing way. I mean, just look. His stilts could reach up to 290 feet though, which is actually kind of cool, I think. Number 1, Hypno Hustler. Okay, just look at this dazzling man. What an icon. The Hypno Hustler made his debut in the 80s, which I hope isn't a surprise to anyone. He uses a hypnotic guitar to hypnotize people, wears headphones that stop him from hypnotizing himself, and has boots that emit knockout gas and have retractable knives. What a combo! His story involves him performing at the nightclub Beyond Forever, where Peter Parker and pals just happen to be. Him and his band use their hypnotic grooves to hypnotize the crowd into giving up their goods. Peter Parker, being the hero, obviously knows what's going on and changes into his Spidey suit. During the fight, he realizes the headphones are the only thing keeping Hypno Hustler from hypnotizing himself, and Spider-Man removes them. That's it. right over.
Number 10. Red X. Red X will likely be one of the most potentially recognized on this list, which is why he takes our bottom spot. Well, they've never appeared in the comics until recently, which might have left some confused following Red X's appearance in Future State. He is a fan favorite character from the Teen Titans animated series. Red X only made 2 appearances in that series though, one where his identity was actually Robin and another time as a mystery character after the suit Robin wore as Red X was stolen. Oh no, who stole it? The best part, we still don't know the mystery behind who Red X really is. Even when Red X appeared in the Teen Titans Future State series and unmasked, it was still a mystery, as we couldn't quite make out their face, which was drawn to appear shrouded in shadow. Teen Titans Academy will likely be where you'll need to go to find out the truth behind Red X's identity and the extent of the role they'll play in the Academy's potential destruction, as we saw happen in the reality of Future State. Number 9. Raquel. I don't know how to say this name because it's Skrull. And I don't speak Skrull, but I try my best. Raquel. I swear, so many comic book readers had a collective wait, who moment when Raquel first resurfaced in last year's Empire event. For those who missed it, Empire in short was about the Skrull and Kree ending their years-long war and finally coming together to create the Alliance, ushering in an era of peace between them and across the galaxy, but only after they returned to Earth to defeat their collective enemy. No, not mankind, that was the misdirect. The Kotati. The Kotati were also looking for revenge for being mistreated and had decided to rise up against the Skrull and Kree as well as the people of Earth. Oh no! In fact, the Kotati are another villain that I feel like people were like, wait, who? During all of this, Hulkling became the new Emperor of the Alliance, being both the child of an honored Kree soldier, Mar-Vell, and Skrull royalty being the son of Princess Anel. Another character who also revealed themselves to still be alive and manipulating all of this, while also disguised the entire time, was Raquel, the Skrull Empress. She was the ruler of the Skrull people alongside Emperor Dorek VII and is the grandmother of Emperor Dorek VIII, aka Hulkling. So if you get to the part in Empire with that reveal, yeah, that's who that is. Well, not a new villain of course, she was thought long dead since the 80s when she seemed to have perished in Fantastic Four issue 257. But it turned out she didn't. Ha ha ha. So sneaky. Number 8. Four Horsemen. Usually when you hear Four Horsemen, you are inclined to think of Apocalypse, the X-Men villain, and his disciples. And yet DC also featured their own new and improved Four Horsemen in Future State. While Darkseid sometimes has his own Four Horsemen of Apocalypse, these villains aren't even seemingly related to that version either. At least not initially anyways. However, like every other group of Four Horsemen ever, they do follow that status quo of having a member who each represents the aspect of either war, pestilence, death, or famine. This time around, the Four Horsemen are a collection of DC characters, not all of which are recognizable. Famine is a possessed Wally West, turned villain again, of course. Pestilence is the possessed Roundhouse, and War is a possessed Megabat, aka Lucas Laporte. Number 7. Four Horsemen. The other Four Horsemen. It's different. And of course, Marvel also had their newest Four Horsemen introduced in the past year as part of the X-Men event 10 of Swords. We met their horsemen on the battlefield who came from Morocco and participated in the Otherworld tournament. These four are Apocalypse's children, hence probably why he's always referred to as Four Horsemen who came after in such a way, because they were actually filling a hole left by his original Four Horsemen who were his actual children. These Morocco mutants were literally named after each aspect belonging to the Horseman Collective: war, famine, pestilence, and death. While they each had striking character designs which will probably help them stand the test of time, or at least stand a chance in terms of comic book history, they also made many readers ask, new event, who dis? We were all like, who are these people? I was like, have I seen these people before? Am I supposed to know? They knew? Where did they come from? They're new. It's all good. Number 6. Miriam Drew. And her clones! Miriam Drew has recently revealed herself as both an ally and villain to Jessica Drew in the newest Spider-Woman series. Truly, this newest run is a series of revelation after revelation for Jess. Miriam Drew is Jessica Drew's mother, who we initially thought died but turns up elderly and yet alive years later. She reveals the story of what really happened to her in issue 5 of the series, and then proceeds to lose her mind as time progresses throughout that issue. Eventually she ends up accusing Jessica of being a monster monster and blaming her for everything that has come to pass. The two come to blows and it gets really messy. But that isn't the last we'd see of this crazed version of Miriam, and in fact during her next appearance there would be much more at stake and many more revelations that would not just affect Jessica, but also all of those people around her. No spoilers, but just seriously, you need to read this series. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are enjoying this list and you want to see more like it, let us know by giving this video a thumbs up and maybe subscribe. You should subscribe. Just do it. Come on, do it. Number 5. Peacekeeper 01. Or Peacekeeper 1. Peacekeeper 1 is a villain who appears in a few different places in Future State, including Batman, Superman, Dark Detective, Nightwing, and of course, the next Batman. This villain keeps their face masked and therefore was shrouded in mystery for most of our glimpse into this possible future state. However, in the end, we did get a reveal with him taking off his mask, but he didn't appear to be anyone fans collectively recognized. We were like, who's that supposed to be? Instead, it seems to have been a reveal that will allow us to recognize the character later on in the comics when we meet him again in the present before he has become Peacekeeper 1. Ideally. Otherwise, what was really the point of that unmasked panel, right? Number 4. The Pale Girl. The Pale Girl is a more mysterious villain who only showed up in the first few issues of the newest Wolverine run from 2020. She was part of the first story arc from issue 1 to issue 3. Initially, I thought the Pale Girl might just be some kind of hologram or hallucination, but we would later learn that she was an entity all her own, completely separate from the hallucinogenic drug made out of the smuggled Krakoan flowers. Later on, it's revealed that the Pale Girl is in fact some kind of mutant and is working in league with the government-led team of Russian mutants, which means we might see her when we get our own Krakoan assembled Russian mutant team, who will likely be called together to deal with the threat of the opposing national team of mutants and their own agenda. Number 3. Kuat. Kuat the Sun God is not really classified as a supervillain, but he's definitely villain adjacent. He's definitely a troublemaker, more a mischievous character who becomes a later ally of Yara Flor's Wonder Woman in Future State. But he does become an antagonist to Superman in the second issue of Superman Wonder Woman, the Future State comics. So I'ma count him for this list. There, the two heroes work to defeat Solaris, and Kuat just ends up kinda getting in the way, which ultimately leads to Superman punching him in the face. Kuat himself is a sun god recognized by one of the tribes of the Amazonian rainforest. He and his twin brother, Ayea, benefit from Yara Flor's position as Wonder Woman, as since her rise to prominence, more people have come to worship and believe in them again. Number 2. Octavia Vermis. Octavia Vermis is a villain who shows up in the latest Spider-Woman series. If you don't recognize her initially, it's just because she has only been introduced to us there and only made her very first appearance last summer in issue 2 of the newest Spider-Woman series from 2020. By the way, have I mentioned how much you should read this series? Because you should totally check out this series. It's brilliant and it features Spider-Woman fighting all kinds of crazy enemies, including dinosaurs. Yep, dinosaurs. You are gonna see her fight some dinosaurs and it's awesome. Octavia's father was Hydra Commander Otto Vermis, whom Jessica killed. But Octavia's not really after Jess for revenge. She's more interested in the research that led to Jessica being empowered with her spider-like abilities. As such, the two have fought over spider specimens and beat each other half to death over other such valuable research. But their mutual interests in research has also occasionally put them on a path to team up with one another. Number 1. Horticulture. Unless you've read the select few issues that they have appeared in, it's likely that you don't know this supervillain group yet. But this is one you really should know, as they are definitely worth reading. Definitely one of my favorites of new villains. Horticulture popped up during the Empire event last summer in the short Empire X-Men tie-in series. They made their first appearance, however, in issue 3 of the latest run of X-Men, which started in late 2019. Horticulture is a team of villains made up of elderly agrochemists who plan to take control of all plant life on the planet so that they can reduce the Earth's population of humans to protect the Earth and give them power over who they believe deserves to live or die as the Earth reverts back to a more natural state. So far we have met 4 women who belong to this group: Augusta Bromes, Edith Scutch, Opal Vedivere, and Lily Lamus.
Number 10. Fu Manchu. This villain is more remembered for the facial hair he inspired and for being an incredibly offensive stereotype than he is for his fictional acts of villainy. Fu Manchu was created all the way back in 1912 by an English author named Sax Rohmer after he asked a Ouija board how he would make his fortune, and I swear this is true, the board spelled out a racial slur that inspired him to come up with the character. Dr. Fu Manchu has studied at various universities and has 4 doctorates. He is a crime boss who uses members of various secret societies as his enforcers, as well as various dangerous exotic animals like cobras and spiders to attack his enemies. His goal is to take over the world so that he can restore China to its former glory. He has a daughter named Fa Lo Sui who is frequently trying to usurp him by teaming up with the heroes who are trying to defeat him. He is most frequently paired against the heroes of the novels Dennis Nayland Smith and Dr. Petrie. He is one of the first supervillains in fiction, but his legacy is far overshadowed by the fact that he is directly responsible for starting the yellow panic trope in fiction, where Asian characters began being consistently written as plotting and dangerous masterminds trying to bring down the white man. He has had a permanent impact on fiction as a result, inspiring other dicey characters like Marvel's The Mandarin. Number 9. The Fly. The problem with having heroes who kill their villains is that you don't get many recurring enemies as a result. This is especially true for the pulp hero known as the Spider, who is a millionaire who dresses up in a disguise and brutally murders his opponents. He is a character known for his bloodlust, kind of like the Punisher of his time, but one of the few villains who managed to give the Spider any repeated trouble was the Fly. First appearing in the August 1934 issue of Spider magazine in the story Prince of the Red Looters, the Fly is also a wealthy playboy who has become bored and decides to take up crime as a hobby. At the story's start, he has killed 4 men and stolen $50,000. Despite most of the criminal underworld being terrified of the Spider, the Fly places an ad in the paper with an invitation saying, "Won't you come into my parlor?" The two meet and the Fly challenges the Spider to a sword fight. The 2 men are evenly matched and the Fly eventually pulls a gun, but being the sporting type, he doesn't kill him and instead ties the Spider up and leaves him for the police. The Fly goes on to rob a bank, leaving a massive trail of carnage in his wake. He is smart enough to deduce that the Spider is really Richard Wentworth and makes several assassination attempts on him. He sends his stolen goods in the mail to the various gangsters of the city in order to earn their support and uses his newfound syndicate to rob several banks across the city. By the end of the story, the Spider and the Fly engage in another sword fight that seems to end with the Fly's death, but in a move that was highly unusual in the Spider magazine, he returned a year and a half later in the story Green Globes of Death, where he had developed gas weapons that caused his victims to bleed from every pore. As I mentioned in my hero version of this video, Spider stories were incredibly violent, with death tolls routinely going into the thousands by the end of each book. Number 8. Voodoo Master. One of the recurring foes of the Shadow is Dr. Rodil McQuino, who has hypnotic powers that he has attained through the use of black magic, which allow him to take control of people's minds and make them a part of his mindless zombie-like horde. He used these abilities to come to New York and start a cult, which he used to attain wealth. This brought him into conflict with the Shadow, who shot him and presumed him dead. Unfortunately, Voodoo Master returned and began an experiment which he planned to run on the entire human race. He planned to gain a massive amount of followers in the United States, but felt that the machine age was making this more difficult to accomplish. So, once he settled in the town of Hampstead and began enacting his scheme, he also began destroying the city's various factories. The Voodoo Master made 3 appearances in the original Shadow magazine stories before being permanently killed off, but he is also a recurring character in the Dynamite Entertainment comic book series featuring the Shadow. Number 7. The Sky Band. The Sky Band are a gang of villains who battle the pulp hero known as the Phantom in several stories throughout the character's history. The Sky Band are an all-female group of sky pirates who terrorize the air. They are led by a woman named the Baroness, who has an unrequited love for the Phantom despite them being on opposite sides of the law. Another member of the gang, named Sala, is also in love with the Phantom, and frequently comes into contact and/or conflict with the hero many times throughout his storied history, and once the Baroness dies in her first appearance, Sala takes over the gang. They are a mainstay of the Phantom mythology, appearing in the original comic strips, the comic books published by Gold Key, Charlton, DC, Marvel, Moonstone, and Dynamite Comics. They also appeared in an episode of the Defenders of the Earth cartoon, which featured the Phantom fighting alongside Mandrake the Magician and Flash Gordon in space, although in this version they were of course space pirates. Their most notable appearance is probably in the 1996 movie starring Billy Zane, where Sala was played by Catherine Zeta-Jones. Number 6. Dr. Death. There are actually two Dr. Deaths. The first one was a recurring villain of a rather boring hero named Nibs Holloway, who was a troubleshooter for a jewelry company. This Dr. Death was an international criminal who of course stole jewelry. He died at the end of his first appearance, but due to reader interest was brought back for a second story. He died again, before being resurrected for one more time for a fourth and final story. The character proved more popular than the hero, in being that it was difficult to come up with scenarios where a jewelry store troubleshooter would come into conflict with an over-the-top supervillain. A new Dr. Death was created and given his own book. The new Dr. Death was a mad scientist named Dr. Rance Mandarin, who used to be the dean of psychology at Yale before he lost his mind and decided that he would use both scientific and occult methods to kill as many people as possible, believing that the world was becoming overpopulated. His enemy was a supernatural detective named Jimmy Holm, who would stop all the Doctor's plans and eventually marry his niece, Nina. Number 5. Ming the Merciless. When the Earth was bombarded by a series of meteors, Dr. Hans Zarkov built a spaceship to locate the meteor's planet of origin. He set off to space with a woman named Dale Arden and a man named Flash Gordon in tow. They traveled to the planet Mongo, which they discovered was being ruled by an evil emperor named Ming the Merciless. Ming immediately wanted to marry Dale and forced Flash to fight in his gladiatorial battle arena. He became a staple of the Flash Gordon mythos and has appeared in every subsequent version of the series, from the original 1934 comic strips to the subsequent film serials of 1936, 38, and 1940. He went up against Flash and the gang again in the 1979 and 1996 animated series, as well as the 1986 Defenders of the Earth series and a 2007 live-action series for the Sci-Fi Channel. Although he is perhaps most well known to modern audiences for his appearance in the 1980 feature film where he was played by Max von Sydow. He has a bit of a complicated legacy, as he is clearly inspired by negative Asian stereotypes like Fu Manchu, but since he's technically an alien, this issue has been avoided in certain adaptations by making him a generic white dude in the 2007 series, or a green reptilian alien in the Defenders of the Earth series. Number 4. Shiwan Khan. Alright, this is the last of the Yellow Peril style villains on this list. The Shadow's arch nemesis, Shiwan Khan, has a kinda funny backstory, as in the pulp novels he is said to be the last living descendant of Genghis Khan. Of course, due to DNA testing, we now know that Genghis Khan had so many children that 1 in 200 people alive today are descended from him. But let's go with it. Shiwan is intent on living up to his ancestors' legacy by conquering as much of the world as possible. He operated out of the lost city of Xanadu, where he was trained by Tibetan monks who taught him how to harness his telepathic powers and become invisible, clairvoyant, and how to control the dead. Shiwan Khan is far and away the most often recurring shadow villain, appearing in pulp stories The Golden Master, Shiwan Khan Returns, The Invincible Shiwan Khan, and Masters of Death. He's also appeared at some point in every subsequent comic book iteration of the Shadow, including those published by Archie Comics, DC Comics, Dark Horse Comics, and Dynamite Entertainment. He is also the main antagonist of the 1994 live-action Alec Baldwin starring Shadow movie. Number 3. John Sunlight. Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze, who has an Arctic headquarters called the Fortress of Solitude and whose first name is Clark, is an obvious source of inspiration for Superman. Although he doesn't have actual superpowers and was instead trained from birth to be an expert in almost every field and to achieve peak human condition. He is an incredibly effective pulp hero, and as a result never really had many repeat villains other than John Sunlight, who managed to survive his first encounter with Doc Savage only to be killed in his second appearance. John Sunlight is the only character who can match Savage in intelligence and even overcome him in strength. As a result, the two have an immense respect for each other, even if they are enemies. He has the ability to hypnotize all but the most intelligent of men, and his goal is to end world hunger, war, and intolerance. Unfortunately, he wants to do this by becoming the ruler of the world, so this doesn't really gel with Savage's goals. In the first story, The Fortress of Solitude, he escaped from an Arctic Russian prison before he came across Doc's fortress, which was filled with Savage's most deadly inventions. He began selling these weapons to rival armies who were at war. At the end of this adventure, Savage came across remains that seemed to imply that Sunlight had been eaten by a polar bear, but it was actually Sunlight who ended the bear and went on to try and get his revenge on Savage in the story The Devil Genghis, where the hypnotized masses turned on him and tore him limb from limb. The character has appeared in the years since in several of the various Doc Savage comic books that have come out in the years since. Number 2. Dr. Satan. Weird Tales magazine is best known for publishing the stories of authors like Seabury Quinn and H.P. Lovecraft. And though they did publish a few recurring characters, they didn't really go in for the hero or villain pulps that would one day evolve into the superheroes we know today. However, they did have one hero and villain pair that they would publish 8 adventures of between 1933 and 1934. The hero was an occult detective named Ascot Keene, but it was the more colorful villain who received top billing. Dr. Satan. Dr. Satan would use occult magic in order to enact criminal schemes, such as causing plants to grow out of men's skulls and reanimating dead bodies to pose as kidnap victims in order to extort people for money. Although we never learned his true identity, we did learn that he is actually just a rich playboy who learned magic and turned to crime out of boredom. This character has fallen into the public domain, so you could make your own Dr. Satan stories and no one could stop you. Number 1. Superman. Fans of the Man of Steel may know that Superman was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and first appeared in Action Comics #1 in 1938 before taking the world by storm and becoming one of the most enduring and iconic pop culture icons of all time. What not everyone is aware of is that Clark Kent was not the first Superman that Siegel and Shuster created. In 1933, 5 years before Action Comics #1, the pair published a short story in issue 3 of the fanzine Science Fiction: The Advance Guard of Future Civilization under the pseudonym of Herbert S. Fine. The character was a poor, bald man named Bill Dunn who was in a breadline before being selected by a scientist to be the subject of an experiment. The chemicals that the professor made Bill ingest granted him telepathic powers and he killed the scientist. This Superman decides to use his powers to conquer the world, but soon discovers that the effects of the potion are temporary and without the scientist, he will soon be a poor nobody on the breadlines once again. Siegel and Shuster would end up reusing the name when they created their more famous character, but the two would eventually introduce another bald villain for the new Superman to fight.
Number 10. Trapster. Oddly enough, although Trapster is a super weird and relatively obscure villain, he's still somehow made his way into a surprising number of comics. I mean, he has been around since the 60s, so considering that, I guess not so many, but we're still talking over 100 issues at least, which is pretty weird considering who Trapster is. Trapster is weird because, well, he was originally known as the guy who came armed with a glue gun, or a paste gun if you will. Initially he was known by the supervillain name Paste Pot Pete. However, Trapster has since come to loathe that name and much prefers to be called Trapster instead, as he feels the former name makes him sound lame and is often used out of disrespect for him. Admittedly, he is kinda lame though. Sorry Trapster, you might be a genius, but you still fight with glue. So anyone that fights with a glue gun, I'm just saying. Although I will say if it was a hot glue gun burns do hurt a lot. Number 9. Polka Dot Man. You might think you know Polka Dot Man, but do you really know him? If you've seen the Suicide Squad, you are familiar with a version of Abner Krill, but the original Polka Dot Man, also Abner Krill of the New Earth continuity, was a little bit different when it came to his power set, at least initially. Initially when Polka Dot Man, or Mr. Polka Dot, first appeared, he came armed with multiple different weapons which all came from the polka dots on his suit. He could pull them off and basically turn them into any means of different weapons and devices, even once turning one into a getaway vehicle. Number 8. Vanisher. Vanisher was actually one of the first villains that the X-Men came up against way back in X-Men issue number 2. In short, he was weird because he gave the X-Men so much trouble, especially considering Marvel Girl was on the team and he was only a teleporter. Though at this time they'd never encountered a teleporter before and were fairly new heroes. Also, Jean likely unknowingly had mental blocks in place. Vanisher's demise was also quite dark and odd when Professor X, who had left the X-Men to fight alone initially as a test, finally came to their aid and easily defeated Vanisher by making him forget who he was, which honestly is a pretty horrifying punishment. Don't worry though, that wouldn't be the end of Vanisher, and he'd also end up getting a much less extravagant costume. Which actually is kinda sad. I do like his original costume, with its like whole thing. It's very red and patterned. Number 7. Crazy Quilt. Crazy Quilt actually might sound familiar to you in terms of his overall personality and demeanor, as it seems like the version of Polka Dot Man that we saw in the Suicide Squad, to me at least, is actually closer to a combination of the original Polka Dot Man mixed with, well, this villain, Crazy Quilt. Crazy Quilt was Paul Decker, a painter and criminal who left clues in his artwork as to his criminal plots. Eventually, he was apprehended, left blinded by a gunshot wound in the scuffle. He would regain his sight through an experimental procedure where his optic nerves were attached to a helmet, but the blinding colors that he would see would cause him to go insane. At least when I was watching the Suicide Squad, I was like, this Polka Dot Man kinda reminds me of Polka Dot Man mixed with Crazy Quilt, cause he's so crazy. Number 6. Unus the Untouchable. Another villain who almost foiled the X-Men in their early days was Unus. Unus the Untouchable was a mutant who couldn't be touched by those who would do harm to him, making him seemingly invincible when he first came up against the X-Men in issue 8. His power was also weirdly specific as it didn't repel all things from him, and mainly seemed to target those who fought against him and projectiles that would do him harm. Beast was the one to help defeat him when he learned of his true nature in a wrestling match against him. This was during a brief moment when Hank McCoy left the team. When Unus turned to a life of crime, Beast was the one to stop him by creating a device that intensified his power, causing everything to be repelled from Unus, including food. Starving, Unus eventually agreed to stay on the straight and narrow, and Beast returned his power levels to how they once were, allowing Unus to return to his wrestling career. Number 5. Ruby Thursday. Ruby Thursday is a super weird villain who I still can't even really believe to this day actually exists. But she does. I believe she was kinda designed as a character on a dare, but don't quote me on that story as it's just something I remember reading somewhere. I didn't have time to go back and double check all that, but I'm pretty sure her creation story is something like someone dared someone to create a thing. It's a good story if you want to go check it out. Her creation is credited to Steve Gerber and Sal Buscema, and she first appeared in Defenders issue 32 in the 70s. Her whole thing is that she is a sexy villain lady, but in the place of where her head should be, she instead has a big red ball that is made up of organic circuitry and thereby gives her powers, while also acting as a stand-in head, because you still need the head to do things, so yeah. Number 4. Spook. A villain I love to talk about, but whom no one really seems to remember apparently. Val Caliban was a master escape artist who first appeared in Detective Comics back in the 70s. He was initially caught and long thought to be dead after being executed, or at least we thought he was executed, appearing in an almost ghost-inspired robe of a costume. In reality, Caliban had survived using his skills of hypnosis and escapism. He was also privy to the architectural plans of the prison as he'd worked to help design it. Thereby, he was able to exploit that knowledge and use it to escape. Honestly, it was pretty silly of them to try to put him in a prison that he'd designed, in my opinion. Years later though, he wouldn't be so lucky when changes had been made to its design and he ended up back in the prison again. And he'd be even more unlucky when he ran into Damian Wayne. It's Damian Wayne. Number 3. Gaggy. Gaggy was the sidekick of Joker. Before there was Harley Quinn, there was Gaggy. Although to be clear, Joker and Gaggy were not in a romantic relationship. Just thought I'd point that out. They were simply partners in crime. In fact, when Harley did start coming around, it was later revealed that Gaggy actually became jealous of her, and even that she was perhaps the reason for Gaggy's fall from glory in the Joker's eyes. At least that was how Gaggy saw it. He basically blamed Harley for all of it. More recently, Gaggy made a reappearance in the Batman 3 Joker's limited series, but sadly, he was killed off in that book, being eaten by a Joker shark. R.I.P. Gaggy. I love how Gaggy came back and then they were like, he's dead. I was like, oh, okay. Bye. Number 2. Tatterdemalion. Tatterdemalion is by all accounts a pretty weird and obscure villain, who at one point was stopped by Dazzler. He doesn't really have any powers, but instead has some kind of forgotten skills, possibly. He started out initially as a tap dancer who found fame in the movies with his dancing partner Julia Walker. Knowing eventually his star would dim, he invested money in a casino in Las Vegas, but later, after he retired to run it, was swindled out of his investment and money by criminals. Following that, he became a derelict and ended up allied with the committee. He eventually would become the crazed criminal Tatterdemalion, who sought to destroy money and material possessions as a means of revenge for what had unfairly happened to him. Honestly, it seems pretty fair of him to go that route. Eventually, Daz stopped him and helped to reunite him with his former dance partner Julia Walker, but eventually she would grow tired of looking after him. Which also, fair. Number 1. Snowflame. Snowflame was originally a villain that first appeared in the 80s in DC Comics, making his first appearance in New Guardians issue number 2, and coincidentally, his last appearance as well, in the New Earth continuity anyways. Snowflame's powers are fueled by drugs, which grant him superhuman speed, strength, pyrokinesis, and made him numb to pain. He could also infect other people, intoxicating them merely by touching them. And guess what? There's more. It gets better. In 2020, he actually made a return in the Prime Earth continuity, appearing in the 2018 Catwoman series in issue number 23. So while he still remains obscure, he's also kind of recently renew as well. Yay.
In a 10 Werewolf by Night. The first time we've seen Moon Knight in the comics actually wasn't in his own series, but rather Werewolf by Night number 32. He faced off against Jack Russoff, aka Werewolf by Night, making Russoff his enemy. However, technically, Moon Knight was the villain in this scenario, hence its placement at number 10. Jacob Russoff is a werewolf, but unlike his dad, also a werewolf, Jack could control when and where he would transform, not just under a full moon. He had much more control over his abilities in werewolf form as well, except for when there was a full moon, because that's when Jack would be at his strongest but also completely out of control, which is a concept that sounds a lot like a D&D character. His superpowers include werewolf physiology along with superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, stamina, a healing factor, and of course a hairy body packed with a nasty set of teeth and killer claws, something the ladies love. In at 9, Morpheus. Morpheus first appeared in Moon Knight number 12 back in the early 80s, and he's one of the rare horrifying characters that people actually feel sympathy for. Despite his vampiric appearance, he should not be mistaken for Morbius. This is a different person. The character who's getting the standalone movie, no one knows what universe it's in. Yeah, Morbius is indeed a pseudo-vampire, while Morpheus is something else entirely. His real name is Robert Markham, and he got sick from an old virus that caused segments of his DNA to be inhibited by the virus. He sought medical attention and Dr. Peter Alron gave him an untested drug to help him, but it all backfired, causing Markham to change dramatically appearance-wise while also taking away Markham's need for sleep and giving him unfathomable psionic powers. However, the lack of sleep rendered him crazy, after which he had taken the alias Morpheus after the Olympian god of dreams. With his newfound powers, Morpheus sought revenge upon Alron, only to encounter Moon Knight in the process.
Number 8. What if the Gamma Bomb spawned 1,000 Hulks? This story comes to us from volume 2 of the What If series that started back in 1989. In issue 71, we get to imagine a reality where instead of just one Hulk, or the members of the Hulk family plus Hulk, we had 1,000 of them, which I would say is ultimately too many Hulks. In this story, it was the bombing on Hiroshima that resulted in these thousands of Hulks coming into existence, survivors of the attack that were basically mutated, so they became Hulks. In the end, Bruce Banner, aka Hulk, who of course goes on to become the Hulk in the story, must attempt to stand up against this army and attempt to defeat it with the help of some friends. Number 7. What if Betty Brant, instead of Spider-Man, had been bitten by the radioactive spider? This one comes to us from a 3-part story and is simply one story within that. It is from the original What If series volume 1 from 1997, issue number 7. Here, Betty Brant, instead of Peter Parker, is the one bitten by the radioactive spider, gaining spider-like abilities. While the story isn't a strange premise at all, I don't think it's weird for Betty Brant to become, a version of Spider-Man. What really makes this one stand out for me in terms of its weirdness is Betty's costume here, which is it's something. It's also odd that in this alternate reality, Betty happens to be the only alternate person to become Spider-Man that manages to survive the ordeal, with both John Jameson and Flash Thompson in this issue, who are featured in the other 2 stories, dying as a result of gaining spider powers and attempting to use them. Instead of Betty choosing not to pursue the thief that kills Peter's Uncle Ben, she simply is unable to because she used up all her web fluid posing for pictures for Peter. Which is a whole other thing, but also, wait, can't you just go after them anyways? Don't you have superpowers? It doesn't matter that your web fluid is gone. Anyways, she still blames herself for Uncle Ben's death and decides to quit being Spider Lady, which I think is a little harsh. I feel like she wasn't really super responsible for that, but I guess she could have gone after him. I don't know why she didn't do that. Be like, use your super strength, climb on walls, do any of the other things you can do. Number 6. What if Submariner never regained his memories? This story allows us to glimpse into an alternate reality where Namor never met the Human Torch and never ended up regaining his memories and returning to Atlantis, learning that he was the true ruler of the underwater kingdom. Instead, the Submariner remains unaware of his true heritage and ends up joining a ship's crew, finding himself inexplicably drawn to the sea. I wonder why. The captain of the ship, Namor's friend McCandless, ends up being mutineered against and goes overboard while injured when he believes they found the lost entrance to the center of the earth. Namor, or Mr. Smith as he's known, follows after him and ends up being retrieved from the ice-cold water by Inuits later on. They end up worshipping Namor as the Lord of the Frozen Sea, along with frozen Captain America, who they worship as the Lord of the Frozen Ice. And Namor's like, I guess this is my life now, and I'm pretty good with it. So I guess it all worked out in the end, and now he just gets to be the Lord of the Sea really far up north where it's cold. Cool, I guess? Number 5. What if Iron Man was trapped in the time of King Arthur? While all of these stories are based on things that actually did happen, this is also based on something that did happen, so if you think it sounds weird because it's just so random, that is a thing that actually happened, where Iron Man and Dr. Doom in main continuity traveled back to the time of Arthurian legend. However, rather than getting back home in this version while Doom manages to leave, he leaves Iron Man trapped in the past. Oh no! A weird turn of events ends up leaving Tony Stark as the ruler and king of England following the death of his friend King Arthur. Tony actually proves to be a great king and lives out his days there in the past just as an accomplished and celebrated ruler. I actually wonder what effect that would have had on the present, because I feel like everything would be very different if Tony Stark were the king of England. This all goes down in issue 33 of the 1997 What If series, so you can check that out if you want. Number 4. What if the Fantastic Four had different superpowers? One of them is just being a giant brain. It's true. Actually, overall, these powers feel very Doom Patrol meets X-Men in my opinion. In this alternate story, when subjected to cosmic radiation, the FF get completely different powers than what each member has in main continuity. Johnny becomes a robot, Ben gets dragon-like wings, Reed is just a disembodied brain, admittedly not a very great power, and Sue ends up with the least original powers, getting Reed's old powers instead. The ability to stretch her body like Taffy or Silly Putty. Really, I feel like Sue always gets sort of like the worst part of these stories whenever she's in a what if. Hers are always so like quick or just so kinda lame, and I'm like, dang, why doesn't Invisible Woman get some cool stuff? I think she was still Invisible Girl at this time though, maybe that's why. Number 3. What if Aunt May instead of her nephew Peter had been bitten by that radioactive spider? This story reimagines what would have happened if once again it was not Peter Parker who received the fateful radioactive spider bite, but instead was his elderly Aunt May. This is from a humor issue, so you know it's gonna be weird and you know it's gonna be great. And it is. Aunt May here ends up getting bit after realizing that Peter had left his lunch at home on the day he and his class were meant to visit the exhibit at the Science Institute. And if you're like, Amanda, it's not called the Science Institute. Seriously, if you go to this issue, that is what is written on the building in the Science Institute. Of what? We don't know. She successfully delivers the forgotten lunch to Peter, cottage cheese and mashed string beans, but ends up feeling unwell on her way home, and finds that she has developed superpowers. She makes her own costume, becoming Spider-Man, and ends up facing off in this story with the ridiculous villain, Leapfrog. Because that's just how it goes. Number 2. What if the Fantastic Four all had the stretching powers of Mr. Fantastic? Oh boy, I love this issue because we get 4 stories where we get to imagine what it would be like if multiple members of the FF shared basically the same powers. And in the one where they all get stretching powers, they just never end up becoming the Fantastic Four because their collective power is just considered, well, kinda lame. Sue in fact insists that they never let anyone know of their powers because she feels like, and I quote, a freak. Both Sue and Ben feel as though the stretching powers are ridiculous, monstrous, ugly, and dumb, while Reed and Johnny actually think they're pretty neat and even could be useful. Still, Sue and Ben's way of thinking wins out, so the Fantastic Four never become a superhero team. The end. Number 1. What if Thanos had changed Galactus into a human being? I really love this What If story personally. It comes to us from, once again, one of the humor issues of What If, so you know it's gonna be a riot. In this story, Thanos turns Galactus into a human being in order to defeat him, and Galactus ends up on Earth with no memory of who he was or is. He does, however, happen to look a lot like Elvis Presley, and even sings and plays like him too. He meets a woman named Gertrude who introduces him to the works of Presley, and Galactus is basically convinced that he must indeed be like an amnesiac version of Elvis Presley, returned from the dead. He goes on to have a successful music career, and when his memories are later restored by Adam Warlock, who also offers to return his power to him, he actually decides instead to stay on Earth and live out his life here as Elvis with Gertrude and her son Toby. Which, I mean, fair enough, that sounds like a pretty good life.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Mojo. I'll start this list off with a rather fun one. Not that any villain isn't fun, but when Mojo's involved, it always gets a little too weird in some way. He made his first debut in Longshot issue 3. Mojo is known for using Earth as forms of TV entertainment for the universe. So we're all actors. I'm in your screen right now. I'm actually part of Mojo's universe. I'm not even real. And his power increases the more viewers that he gets for this interdimensional TV show. So if you subscribe and like this video, maybe I'll get more powerful too, who knows? He's part of a race called the Spineless Beings. They're from a planet called Mojo World, of course, inside a pocket dimension called the Mojoverse. So it's all about him, we get it. He messes with the Avengers in a pretty dramatic way as well, especially in Avengers Annual 1. The Avengers of the Supernatural. Wow, there is a title right there. So in this issue, Mojo abducted the Avengers and created another supernatural version of the team. And if that wasn't weird enough, he made them participate in this reality show called Martian Transylvania Superhero Mutant Monster Hunter High School, which is just a mouthful. Basically, the mutants of the Unity Division were goths, the others were football players and cheerleaders, and the Avengers of the Supernatural were nerds. So he likes to play it weird. And before we continue on with this list of Avengers villains, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us more power by giving us a like down there, and if you haven't subscribed already, you might as well click that, and then you can see all our videos pop up. We do all the work for you. We'll just show up in your phone. Number 9, The Leader. Samuel Stearns, aka The Leader, made his first debut in Tales to Astonish issue 62. He was working one night at a chemical research plant, and when he was moving canisters of waste material, one of the canisters broke open, covering him in gamma radiation. God, everybody is so clumsy in comics all the time. Just so many spills. So of course, after the spill, Stearns survived just like Banner did after his gamma accident, but the only difference was it affected him in a much different way. See, he didn't get angrier, he got smarter and smarter, because now his brain could absorb so much more and more information. It actually got to a point where his physical body started to mutate. So now he has this giant green brain head. His head just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It looks like a gushy balloon, just about to pop any second. Of course he's a villain. Look at his head. I mean, no offense, but come on, I'd be upset too. That's all I'm saying. I'd be pretty upset. He started to refer to himself as the leader, using his intellect to become a criminal mastermind, and he clashed with the other Gamma guy, Banner. In fact, he actually ruined Betty and Bruce's wedding once. He's kind of a jerk. But he's gone after the Avengers as well. When the Red Hulk gave Stearns red gamma treatment to enhance him even more, becoming the Red Leader, he became a member of the Thunderbolts. Number 8, Aquagirl and Static. Guess you can say there wasn't a lot of friction with this one. Static. Okay, yeah, you're right. Guys, love is all about timing. Maybe you bump into somebody at a coffee shop, maybe you hit it off then, and then Bob's your uncle. Or maybe you meet somebody when you're captured by the Terror Titans and you're forced to fight as gladiators in the Dark Side Club. Whatever your origin story is, I hope the love works out. Well, that's just the case for Static and Aquagirl. See, when she got back to Titan's Tower, she decided to rejoin as a member with no other options really at that point. And she was getting along with these heroes as well, specifically Blue Beetle and Static. Like, she flirted a bit with Blue Beetle, but with Static, he was also a victim from the Dark Side Club, and they had a lot more in common because they're both kind of going through that together. You go through shit together, you get close. That's how it goes. He was also a victim from the Dark Side Club, and she convinced him to stay with the Teen Titans afterwards. So they had some history there, be it good or bad. So she convinced him to stay with the Teen Titans, although he had a family that was worried sick about him, and they were missing for like months, right? And the issue that fans recognized with this whole fling is that Aquagirl was a flirt with the entire team, and it just didn't make sense for them both to share any affection with each other at this point. Number 7, Raven and Kid Flash. Raven needed help from the Teen Titans, but when she went looking for it, the team was not together at the time. So she enlisted the help of Kid Flash, whom she had a relationship with, and they were both able to convince the Teen Titans to get back together. Sounds like the perfect couple. Sounds like they're working it out awesome. I mean, being able to put together a team of supers, like that's hashtag couple goals right there. Only the thing was, they weren't really in love. Yeah. See, later it was revealed that Kid Flash's feelings were all part of the spell that Raven used on him. She manipulated his feelings, so of course, after that point, it's safe to say the trust between the two was a little bit jaded, a little bit weak. Number 6, Nightwing and Mirage. Miriam Delgado, aka Mirage, comes from the future. And in that future, she's together with Nightwing, who ends up not actually being Nightwing. So Mirage, Redwing, and others joined their forces and became the Team Titans. And the only way to defeat Lord Chaos was to travel back in time and take out his mother. The classic time heist go-to scenario. So they went back 10 years, but they ended up in a different timeline. Also, that's how time works. Never works. Classic time thing. Hey, you wanted this? Nope, now you're in the 50s. So they still went ahead with their plan anyways, and then Mirage thought it would be a smart idea to impersonate Starfire and try and get with the leader of the new Titans, Nightwing. See, that plan didn't work after all, but they ended up joining forces to take out Lord Chaos anyways. So Starfire, during this time, of course, lost a lot of trust from Mirage. So she hooked up with who she thought was her future man, and Dick didn't even notice during this crazy night that it wasn't her. It's just, this is definitely one for the books. Number 5, Nightwing and Raven. Nightwing and Starfire worked together for a while. They were members of the team, they got along, and they're probably one of the better couples. If we did a list about top 10 better couples, they would for sure be in that list. So they were about to get married. They were so close. They were literally right there at the altar when all of a sudden Raven showed up to destroy the wedding, even taking out the priest before he made it official. So Starfire and Dick ended up calling it after some time because Starfire felt like Dick wasn't really in it for the long run. And then Dick was kind of like, you're not wrong. So Raven and Dick were never a couple in the comics. This is an important note. So for her to come out all of a sudden and be attracted to Nightwing was just the writers trying to make Dick seem like a bigger catch at this point. Raven was just getting used to having emotions at this time, being fair. But when it came to keeping it cool around Dick, or rather Nightwing, but when it came down to keeping it cool, acting chill around Nightwing, she just couldn't get a grip, but everything else in her life she could control. She just had to ruin the wedding, eh? I mean, no dancing to shout, no white wine. Number 4, Kid Flash and Solstice. When Bart was captured and forced to serve a life of labor on a distant and lonely planet, Solstice, who at the time was in love with him, just head over heels, took out an agent of the functionary just so she could serve the same punishment and be with him. I remember one time in high school, I said I was part of this group that was slacking off. I got in trouble just so I could go to detention with them, or else I'd eat alone, you know? Ride or die, let's do it. So I get it, but I mean, these stakes were just, you know, a tad higher. So Bart, Kieran, and Superboy decide to remain in the 30th century, and Bart and Solstice were trapped on the planet Takaron Galtos, forced to kill and survive. All the while, love just flows in the air between them. Number 3, Robin and Wonder Girl. This next one is absolutely insane. Okay, it's so gross as well. So after the death of Superboy in Infinite Crisis, Robin's plan was to try and replace him with a clone using Superboy's corpse. Now, of course, that was way easier said than done, and this failed over and over and over again. So Wonder Girl waltzes in and then sees Robin frustrated at these failures, and he starts to destroy all of these attempts of a clone. Then they both bonded over how upset they were at the loss of Superboy, and with all the remains of all these clones just strewn about, just squishing under their feet, they shared a kiss while a tear was coming down their face. Beautiful moment, definitely a beautiful moment to be like, hey, we're gonna get through this, you know, like I miss him too. But like, you're standing on his spleen. You're standing on like 7 of his spleens, all these clones. I'd be like, hey, can we mop first? Like this is gross. I'm hearing squishy squishes while I'm trying to hug you. Can we please get a janitor? I mean, bonding over a death, sure, that's normal, but bonding over the death of somebody that's spilt around you, no way, we can't overlook that. Number 2, Beast Boy and Terra. She pops up in the 2nd season episode titled Terra, of course, when she's running away from a giant scorpion, which sounds like all my nightmares, sounds terrifying. Massive scorpions, no thank you. So the Titans, of course, come to the rescue, but help is not something she needed, really. Yeah, she was actually leading the scorpion into a trap where she would then use her powers to cause this stone bridge to collapse and take out this giant arachnid. And then when she introduces herself to the team, Beast Boy gets shy. He turns into a shy boy. He turns himself into a little turtle, which is something I try and do often. I'm like, oh, we got company. Back into my shell. This neck goes all the way into this hoodies when I'm nervous, when I'm a shy boy. And she loves it. She thinks he's hilarious. She thinks he's the cutest guy ever. Fair. So now Terra and Beast Boy are close. Beast Boy convinces Terra to stay with the team and train, but during that conversation by the water, Terra accidentally moves a rock that Beast Boy is sitting on, so now the secret is out. Terra cannot control her powers. The next day when she's being tested by the team on said powers, Beast Boy gives a few words of encouragement and she completes it. Perfect, love it. This sounds great so far, Taylor. What are you getting at? Does it get worse? This is number 2 for a reason. Then they receive a signal that Slade Wilson has returned and they track his location. So Beast Boy invites Tara. Tara's like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Clearly I passed this test, let's do it. So Tara ends up cornering Slade, and then Slade explains how the team will get rid of her once they realize she can't fully control her powers. He's playing the mind game, okay? But his whole pitch here is that he can surely help with that aspect. He can help her control the powers. So she tells him to hit the road, and then she becomes a full member. Now, during a rendezvous with Beast Boy, the couple cross paths with Slade again, and then Slade reveals that Tara had been a spy the whole time. And to make matters even worse, somehow, in the Judas Contract storyline in the comics, one of the main reasons behind this betrayal was that she, at 15, and Deathstroke were in love. Let's go a little bit higher. Maybe like a lot higher, Deathstroke. I don't know. I mean, age is just a number. Sometimes that number is 15, and sometimes these storylines are pretty. And finally, number 1, Donna Troy and Terry Long. Of course, for number 1, we have to end on the worst couple of all time. So Donna married Terry Long, who was a college professor at the time, and he was in his 30s and was previously divorced. And Donna, again, age is just a number. She was 19 years old and in his class. Yeah, she was his student. He was the teacher. So, oof. So Terry was working a few jobs just to make ends meet, but he wasn't a great boyfriend while they were dating by any means. He hit on her friends numerous times and he used her to get some clout. They were married with a kid until a car crash was just written into the story, taking out Terry and his son, who would go on to become Lord Chaos. So yeah, get rid of a lot of that stuff. Let's just get rid of a lot of that stuff. Fans were not happy with this element of the story, and it's totally justified. And also, bonus points for him hitting on Starfire, and then Starfire also had a crush on him back while this was happening. It was just a mess. I feel like I was watching The Bachelor in Paradise, just ugh. Well guys, there you have it. Drop us a comment down below which of these romances are weird or not weird to you. Let us know your thoughts. I don't know, I think making out in a pile of your best friend's guts is a little bit odd, I'll say, to say the least. Kicking off the list at number 10, the death of Anthony Stark. Yeah, the front page looks like that. Now imagine if that was the poster for Endgame. Oh God, so many tears. So many more tears, rather. Heyo. This issue is wild. It shows all these superheroes mourning the loss of their friend and fellow Avenger. Even Dr. Doom's mourning. He does like a toast. He's a villain. What's going on? He's like, ah yes, let us drink now to the memory of a worthy opponent. And to make things even crazier, he writes a note to Rhodey that says, this key card will give you full access to the entire complex. Take this CD to my office, play it on the AV system, boom. The guy's carrying around super suits in briefcases, but he gives Rhodey a compact disc. Gotta love the time. So he puts it in and clicks play, and it's so sad. It shows Stark explaining that somebody has to continue after him. And then bam, you see a suit made just for Rhodey. What a moment. Tony continues to say that Iron Man was the greatest thing he's ever invented, and he doesn't want it to die with him. What a message, so moving, I'm touched personally. It's overwhelming for Rhodey. I mean, of course, all this newfound responsibility of being Iron Man, plus, oh, mourning your best friend, ayo, that's a tough one. What a week. So finally he suits up and it's so badass. Tony Stark may be dead, but Iron Man lives again. So lovely. And the best part, turns out Tony wasn't actually dead at all, rather just under cryogenic stasis until a scientist sorted out his back problems. Yeah, psych, gotcha, made you look. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could please go ahead and toss us a thumbs up for this video because it helps us out here quite a bit. You guys are the best. All right, now back to Zombie Tony Stark. Number 9, Zombie Time. Marvel's Zombie is amazing. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting and terrifying, but amazing nonetheless. So Marvel Zombies is a 5-part series written by Robert Kirkman, and it doesn't hold back. I mean, right off the hop, we see Spider-Man with his leg just like messed up. He's like eating people. It's gross. It's kind of like these heroes in a way you don't want to see them, but you kind of do want to see them. It's gross, I don't know. And then we also see Captain America with the top of his head just sliced off, just boop, gone. Everybody's like, hey Cap, you know, your brains are hanging out of your head. And then he grabs some brain tissue and says, nope, not all of them. And then in comes Tony Stark. He goes detective mode, right? He's like, whoa, 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 whoa. So you're telling me there's no Magneto left? He just burned away? Banner is only Banner after he eats, and Spider-Man's all emotional like he just had some yum-yums. You didn't save any for me. Interesting. It's a really wild way to see Tony's leadership, especially considering the context. He's like, give me your face now, I want to eat it.
I'm sure the Green Goblin can forge more bacon. Dude, this supposed to last us till we get rescued.
Number 8, Iron Man and Titanium Man. All the metals, all the men, bam, explosions. In Tales of Suspense issue 69, we see another metal guy. This time, he's green. Oh, like that, it's green. You can't see, but it's green. Ah, there we are, now it's green. Titanium Man, how exciting. They make this big event, right, to watch the two smash heads. It's like a UFC fight, but with monologues and narrating every single fight move you're gonna make. If you skip this issue, that's fine, you're not missing out. There's a guy in a suit who thinks he's better, and he's actually slower and way more stupid. Yep, there it is. He wants all the eyes and ears on him, of course, he likes attention, but when it comes to brass tacks, you don't stand a chance, Boris Bulsky. More like Boris Bulsh. Number 7, Superior Iron Man. This is a fun one, but still a little out of character from the Tony that most of us know. So the issue itself starts off pretty neat, okay? It kind of mirrors the tech that he has in his latest films. He can control his suit, fly in it, fly around, high-five babies, all that cool stuff, all while laying in a pool sipping on drinks. Yeah, his new Extremis armor was fascinating. So much so that Tony released it as a smartphone app. Yeah, imagine having that at the bottom. You got messages, Instagram, some Extremis, and then Angry Birds too. You know, all the essentials for sure. So this app allowed people to change their bodies using this virus, becoming however they wanted. What a dream come true. And then Tony does the ultimate move and says the app is actually just a free trial. Yeah, if you want to continue it, you gotta pay $100 a day. Honestly, it's not bad. I mean, dudes are out here buying PlayStation 5s for like $3 grand. That's not a bad price for some Tony tech. I'll just get my buddy Matt from grade 10 to jailbreak my phone again, just like the old days. We're good. Number 6, Demon in a Bottle. Now sure, Tony's struggling with addictions isn't weird per se, but it is a plot device that we're not gonna see in future MCU movies. I mean, we saw a little glimpse of it in Iron Man 2, but not too much, of course, because kids are like, why is he dying? Why is he drinking things? What's going on? So this character arc begins in Iron Man issue 120, and it lasts about 9 issues. At first, we see Tony, and he's just slamming drinks like it's prom night, all right? The opening shot, we see like 3 mini bottles of gin, and then Tony orders more. So the flight attendant's like, hey, how about a magazine to read? And Tony's like, hey, how about another martini? And she even tries to cut him off, but he insists that he's drinking for 2. The other, of course, being his Iron Man persona. Always a healthy sign. Oh, me, I'm drinking for myself and also this H&M sweater, so I need 2, thank you. What happens when you have a superhero who loves slamming martinis? Well, you get Tony Stark flying through the air, drunk, spreading toxic fumes all over a crowd. He's kind of like Hancock in a way, just dangerous. Funny, but dangerous. The alcohol addiction was of course put to the side with the MCU story, thank God. That would take us out of the movie, I think, just a little bit. Like if Tony snapped his fingers and then like a bottle of gin appeared and he's like, perfect. Number 5, Ultimates 3. So since Iron Man 2, we're talking about it a little bit, we saw the relationship between Black Widow and Tony get stronger, and they get really close, but not Ultimates 3 close, heh. So the 2008 5-parter opens up with this shot. All the Ultimates just hanging out in Tony's mansion, and then in the background there's a tape playing. This tape being Black Widow and Tony Stark, doing the thing. Check it out. The issue itself is titled Sex, Lies, and DVDs. Not even Blu-ray either, just DVDs. So what's the deal? Why does this exist? Well, in the Ultimates 2, her and Iron Man dated and of course got engaged, but it's all a lie. A sham. She was trying to destroy the Avengers for the fall of the Soviet Union. That is, until she's killed by Hawkeye. So after she's dead, the tape gets released. People are selling DVDs of it on the streets of New York. It's kind of like in Luke Cage where people are selling footage of the incident, but imagine if they were selling that incident. Some of these stories just need to stay in pages, I think. Number 4, the new Iron Man. The Invincible Iron Man issue 21 had a pretty eye-opening front page illustration. It's Tony Stark quitting. The front page even says, no, this is not a nightmare. So he decides that flying around in a super suit just doesn't blend well with the old ticker, right? He's got heart problems going on. So he looks at somebody else to take on the mantle of Iron Man. So who does he go to besides Eddie March, the famous fighter with brain trauma and damage? Awesome. So he suits up and he loves it, of course. I mean, he's adding quips, he's boxing people, he's making it his own, you know? He's just having a good time. And then Crimson Dynamo ruins that and Tony is forced to return to the tin. I'm surprised he didn't ask Mike Tyson. I mean, his name is already Iron Mike Tyson. Number 3, convention of fear. If you're watching this video right now, or you're part of our over 1 million subscribers, confetti, odds are you ventured around a comic book convention or two. So in Iron Man issue 72, titled Convention of Fear, it shows our man in a can getting the job done and taking out low-level villains like Man-Bull, Whiplash, the Melter, all in the home of a comic convention. And of course the battle comes to an awesome end with fans hailing Iron Man, like real fans too, at this convention. I mean, New York is a pretty common battle place, but a fan convention, I don't know, might be a little bit too meta. Number 2, Iron Man Otar. I mean, it doesn't get much weirder than this. We got Tony Stark squaring up against a Minotaur, and the other plot going on is this weird love triangle with Jasper Sitwell and then Whitney Frost. So the whole time you're kind of raising an eyebrow. The issue as a whole is odd. He doesn't even do well against the Minotaur. Like, this dude struggles to fight the Minotaur. Then in the last second, Miklos the Minotaur has a change of heart and helps Iron Man save Whitney. Ah, it's great, super thrilling. We love happy endings, I guess. We love to see characters lose control and then immediately gain control only moments later. That's my secret, Cap. I'm always a Minotaur in control.
Sorry, boys. Momentary loss of motor nerve.
And finally, number 1, trapped by the Red Barbarian. Remember that part in Winter Soldier where Natasha Romanoff has that amazing face-changing technology that for sure could have come in handy for literally any other movie? Well, in Tales of Suspense issue 42, we see a drawn-out version of that idea with the actor. The actor is an interesting lad. He can resemble almost anybody, and in his words, he says, with the aid of a little makeup. Ah yes, changing your entire appearance? Haha, just dab some eyeshadow on. That should do it, says the actor. So the actor steals some tech from Stark because, well, of course he does. And then Tony makes the Red Army believe that he's the actor because they look the same, and then he steals it back. Then the real actor gets killed because they don't believe that the real actor is... Does your brain hurt? My brain kind of hurts.